Eggs of Steel, Charlie's Eggcelent Adventure, released in Japan as Hello Charlie, is a semi-2D PlayStation exclusive puzzle platformer starring a sentient egg developed by the people who made Babe the Pig talk and gave polar bears diabetes. No, I'm not joking. It is also a deranged and entirely unhinged trip that I will retroactively blame for all the evils of the world. This is on you, Charlie. This is all on you. Rhythm & Hues was, or I guess technically still is, a visual effects studio with a list of credits longer than a very, very long list. This list ends with them winning several Oscars for the 2012 Tiger on Boat movie Life of Pi, after which they immediately went bankrupt, because Hollywood is run by a bunch of ghouls in suits who would grind your children to dust and turn them into glitter if it meant they could make 0.01% more profit. Its corpse has since been resurrected by a coalition of Indian conglomerates to some success, but this video isn't about that. Eggs of Steel was the brainchild of Dan Quarnstrom, a longtime Rhythm & Hues employee who played a major role in creating the Coca-Cola polar bears and was a senior designer on the not good enough for John Goodman, but absolutely good enough for Stephen Baldwin classic, The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas. He has obvious talent, and yet, in 1998, had an idea that he just couldn't shake. Let's make a game. It is a thought that has cursed many. I don't know the man, I've never met him and almost certainly never will, but in this interview where he shares some insight into the game's creation, he states, and I quote this literally and with no alteration whatsoever, that he had kind of come up with this idea of an egg in a steel mill and it just seemed like a marriage made in heaven. An egg in a steel mill. A marriage made in heaven. I don't even know where to start, but it makes sense to me that someone who could say these words out loud without bursting into flames would end up making a game like this.
What are you looking at?
It was the first and last game to come out of Rhythm & Hues, and in that same interview Mr. Quarnstrom acknowledges that they were in over their heads making games, which is indeed a very difficult thing to do. I have stated multiple times on this channel that nobody really sets out to make a bad game, and that I admire anyone who makes the attempt. But still, that's a bit like saying, oopsie poopsie, after having written the Necronomicon. Nobody's perfect, I guess. Anyway, let's get to this utterly damned game. Charlie Taconite is a grotesque sentient egg who works as a night watchman for the Mom Factory. He is also a complete idiot who makes that entire factory go haywire through the power of sheer bumblefuckery. And it's up to him to put everything back in its place by punching time clocks and collecting keys. Look, I don't want to be one of those angry video game dorks, so I'm going to give it to you as direct and clear as I possibly can. But none of this makes sense, okay? Do not expect it to make sense. Don't ask me to make sense of it. I'm just describing what I'm seeing. It's not my fault what I'm seeing is horrors beyond all comprehension. On his quest to shut down the factory, Charlie encounters the typical industrial video game hazards, such as collapsing walkways, rampant robots, and, pooping birds, all while being tormented by a monstrous evil egg named Blast Furnace Bill, who may be the vengeful ghost of someone killed by Charlie's recklessness. Truly the hero this world deserves. Gameplay! It's like a weird puzzle platformer. You walk around in this awkward perspective, awkwardly control the Eggman, do awkward jumps, swing your wrench awkwardly to attack enemies or flip switches, awkwardly throw projectiles, and very, very gracefully roll around at the speed of sound. The world is kind of open in the sense that there is a map with fast travel and you sort of work your way through branches of the level screen by screen until you hit a final puzzle, challenge, or boss fight and get sent back to that section's central area, working your way across the factory bit by bit. The levels are divided into screens composed of pre-rendered backgrounds and the occasional moving 3D element. As Charlie, you not only have to watch your health, but also your heat. There are plentiful fans spread throughout the facility to help you cool down, so it's a mechanic that rarely affects how you play. Collect coins and more lives, buckets full of bolts, temporary power-ups to your wrench, and stumble your way through the world until you give up. That's the basic loop of the game. So what's good about it? Well, it's not too difficult. The game gives you plenty of checkpoints and extra lives. Every now and then you encounter a section that feels like it had some thought put into it. Some idea of how it was supposed to function. Yeah. Okay, so now for the bad. Clearly, as you can see, the game is not a looker. Maybe that the warm glow of a cathode ray tube would soften things up a little, but even then, there's a garish grime to the visual style that is, at best, not very appealing. It actually kind of reminds me of Gremlin Interactive's first-person 3D point-and-click adventure game Normality, in that there is this reckless, almost irresponsible enthusiasm for 3D rendered art that ends up being kinda revolting. But in Normality, this plays into the game's stick-it-to-the-man tone, giving it a colorful hippie punk vibe. Eggs of Steel, though, is just, I don't know, rust. Like, they almost succeeded too well in combining a realistic industrial environment with goofy cartoon elements, and that juxtaposition just might give you tetanus. It doesn't help that a lot of the animations are just... I want to keep using the word deranged. Deranged describes so much of what's going on here. What else would lead to animations like this? These are animations even the grimiest, smelliest, most cigarette smoke-filled bowling alley would reject. Even if the underlying game was great, the visual presentation is just so repugnant, especially coming from a visual effects studio. Of course, the underlying game isn't great. Why? It's not even good. First off, the perspective is all messed up. The use of pre-rendered backgrounds with scaled character sprites means it's often hard to tell where Charlie is, and so you misjudge jumps and enemy locations all the time, which is compounded by the fact that moving and jumping just doesn't feel good at all. Half the puzzle is figuring out what is a walkable platform and what is decoration, where you can fall off and where not. When moving from one screen to the next, you're often repositioned in ways that are frustrating, to say the least. The boss fights almost always come with instructions, which shows you that the designers also lacked confidence in what they made. Don't need to do that if your game communicates how you're supposed to interact with it. And the few times the game did make me go in blind, boy did I wish it didn't. Boy! And there's lots of weird little things, like these paper planes that offer tips or bits of lore. They fly in circles and you need to catch them for some reason. A minor frustration on its own, but together with everything else, it's just... Also, the sound is as ugly as the rest of the presentation. Though the sometimes weirdly out-of-place music can at least be an amusing 10-second reprieve from the horrors of the rest of the game. Eggs of Steel comes across as exactly what it is. Babby's first game. If you had told me that this was made in something like Puzzle Platformer Constructor for Windows 98 or something like that, I would believe you without hesitation. There are many things that are astounding about this game. First, how is it not British? You'd think the egg protagonist and pooping birds were obvious callbacks to Dizzy and Percy the Potty Pigeon. Another thing is, physical copies cost how much? I know it was a Blockbuster exclusive before it got a full release, but my friends, this game is not worth that. I've played some deranged games in my day. I'm practically making a career out of it. But this game, it broke me. Yes, here it is. A game definitively worse than Chibi Robo. In fact, a game worse than Superman 64. I know why Superman 64 was bad. It's something I can understand. But Eggs of Steel is cosmically incomprehensible. A marriage made in heaven. An egg in a steel mill. I try to make it to the end of every game I stream, but I couldn't get there with this one. I just couldn't. I had to give up. It would have cracked my psyche like, well, like...